Danger.
After making 2 internet-era trauma icebergs, I thought about how interesting it would be to go back to a time when young media was still mostly relegated to television, physical media, and other ways of exposure. So today we're looking at the traumatic media experiences of the 90s. And if you guys enjoyed this enough, we'll be back to look at the 80s as well. Make sure you like and sub if you enjoy, and now let's begin. If you were in school from the late 90s through the early 2000s, then you probably remember Animorphs. This sci-fi book series by Katherine Applegate is about a group of young teens that get the power to transform into any animals that they touch in order to fight off an alien invasion. But barely anyone that saw the books would know that, as those covers freaked out just about every kid I knew. The depiction of these kids becoming uncanny abominations during their beast transformations was both the best and worst way to catch the attention of a kid during a library run. Officially launched on January 1st of 1997, the EAS, or Emergency Alert System, has become a common fear of kids all over the US. The EAS is a public warning system that is used to get urgent messages across towns, cities, states, or even the whole nation if needed. They include Amber Alerts, national emergencies, and weather warnings, and can be broadcast via radio, phones, cables, and standard television. What adds to the fear that gets put into kids are the beep sound and that freaking voice that many of them feature. Here's an example to hit that PTSD for you.
At 10:03 p.m. Central Daylight Time, National Weather Service Doppler radar indicated a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado. The most dangerous portion of the storm was located 3 miles southwest of Jackson, moving east-southeast at 60 miles an hour.
The 90s were a booming time when it comes to the evolution of PSAs. These have always been big in the US, but this decade would see stranger danger-focused PSAs peak in showing, as the 80s and 90s would feature high-profile kidnappings. To help prevent this, many public service announcements, educational videos, and even school programs would be employed to teach kids to avoid, fear, and distrust any strange adult, unlocking a new fear that we've seen evolve in real time across the decades.
One of the first lessons I learned as a police officer was that you cannot tell by people's faces if they are good or bad.
In the Dreamtime is what many cite as the scariest episode of the Nickelodeon cartoon Rugrats. It features Chucky having crazy dreams at night that leave him in a state of not being able to know what's real or not. The scare in this episode comes from 2 main scenes, both with the same punchline. Chucky and his dad Chaz, both in separate dreams, approach their friends only for Tommy and Stu to both turn to them and say they aren't who they think they are, with distorted faces, silly voices, and crazy laughs.
I'm not Stu.
Rugrats also freaked out kids with Boppo. This one isn't too deep or much to explain. Boppo is just kind of a freaky clown toy that some kids don't like. Me though, I think both he and his quote are iconic. The 90s were the king of traumatizing kids through uncanny media meant for them, and that's why so many don't like the Gushers commercials. This series of ads features kids eating Gushers and having their heads transform into different fruit, and sometimes dinosaurs too. They never scared me personally, but I can't blame any kid for getting the creeps from looking at these things. Super Mario 64 introduced what is probably the first jump scare in Mario history. While traversing the level Jolly Roger Bay to collect a star, players must enter the sunken ship, but to get to it they have to lure out a giant killer eel named Unagi. To do this you have to swim near the entrance, which causes him to zoom over and attack you, which obviously scared the heck out of a lot of adolescents on account of how many bring it up. To be fair, by 64 and Nintendo standards, this thing is pretty freaky. One of those scenes that scared the heck out of 90s kids came from none other than Disney's Lion King. In Mufasa's final moments during a super intense scene, he's betrayed by his brother while attempting to save his son, dropped into the midst of a stampede. If you weren't one of the kids hit emotionally by this part, I'm sure you can imagine the reaction of some kids that's not seen their first mature film seeing it. While dinosaur kids like I was fell in love with Jurassic Park, there was still a lot of horror in that film that stuck with them and the kids that weren't under that mold. This one isn't hard to explain or comprehend. Those dinosaurs and how they kill and hunt are just kinda scary sometimes. With the start of the 24-hour news cycle in the 80s, kids got a taste of what's to come in the future, with the world being constantly updated by the media. This made the real life tragedies that hit during the decade hit extra hard, and had many on constant edge. Events like Columbine would shed a new light on life and have negative effects on the generation, traumatizing those who weren't even involved. Some of the traumatic media from back then did it on purpose, as in the case of the children's anthology horror series, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Two specific episodes that you hear talked about a lot in this vein are The Tale of the Dead Man's Float, which features a horrifying, even almost by adult standards, zombie hidden in a pool trying to drown people, and The Tale of Laughing in the Dark, which has Zebo the Clown who, man, just look at him. The impact of the Blair Witch Project in the 90s made it a staple in the world of cinematic fear. This found footage horror film was advertised like it was a real documentary, featuring early ARG style internet marketing, and the innovative use of the shaky cam style only added to the intense, realistic tone it was going for. It follows 3 film students traversing a small town while creating a documentary on the Blair Witch, an evil local legend. They get lost in the woods and the scares ensue. One could call the Blair Witch the Exorcist of its time, as it was seen as one of those films so true to life, so scary and so evil that you didn't want to see anything about it. And if you were a kid that watched it, bruh, your sleep was cooked. Before antivirus software became standard and internet literacy improved, computer viruses felt like the scariest thing of all time. One wrong click, especially with the introduction of torrents, LimeWire, Napster, and the like, and you could completely wreck your family computer. Stories about viruses deleting entire hard drives or stealing personal information only added to the paranoia. Resident Evil's initial release instantly made it a horror hit. This is another entry that doesn't take much explanation. You put a horror game full of disturbing imagery, intense situations, jump scares, and giant spiders, this still killed me in the new Resident Evil 9, in front of a bunch of kids, and you know they're gonna come out scared. While he first appeared in the 40s, you could include Smokey in any trauma Iceberg up until the 2010s with how prominent he was. Not because he's scary, cause honestly he's cute, but because his message, voice, and the fire imagery tended to put kids on edge. I know it was the point, but man, as a kid, this guy freaked me out. I used to be scared thinking he'd just pop up one day. The STD scare would see peaks in the 80s, and that craze would continue into the 90s, resulting in a bunch of PSAs airing throughout the years. There are too many to talk about, but they all had the same purpose, and that was to scare kids and teens with highlights on the dangers of intercourse. If you watched MTV, you came across your fair share of these. As the 90s came to a close, there was a very real fear that the world as we knew it might just stop. The Y2K bug was a widespread concern that computers would fail when the clock hit January 1st, 2000, because many systems only stored years as 2 digits. That meant 99 turning into 00 could read as 1900 instead of 2000, potentially crashing banks, power grids, airplanes, and basically anything run by computers. News coverage, school discussions, and even family conversations built this up into what felt like an incoming digital apocalypse. Some people stocked up on food, others expected planes to fall out of the sky. In the end, nothing happened. There are so many Goosebumps episodes that put kids on edge. But one that's probably the most spoken on is the Haunted Mask duology, which happened to be my 2 favorite episodes in the series. These installments are based around Halloween masks initially worn to just scare other kids, but slowly they become your face.
The mask, it won't come off.
Really? Can't get it off?
It's like it's stuck to my skin.
Morphing you to whatever they are. The scariest one is definitely part 2, where the main character slowly becomes a decrepit old man, wheezing and basically slowly dying until the mask gets off in the end. You knew this one was coming. For some reason, no matter the era, it seems that the assignment for the Honeycomb ad team was to make commercials that weirded out kids. But before the big mouth commercials of the 2000s, it was the introduction of kids becoming the Honeycomb mascot through ugly transformation animations, and going ballistic for cereal. Not much to say here besides that. Early internet chat rooms were a new world. Platforms like AOL chat rooms and random forums let you talk to anyone, anywhere, instantly. And for kids, that was both cool and incredibly risky. There was no real sense of identity verification, no real moderation by today's standards, and no real understanding of online safety. I'm sure you all know about the internet stranger danger we still deal with today. On top of that, there was constant warnings from parents, schools, and PSAs about predators, scams, and people pretending to be someone they weren't. That created a strange mix of curiosity and fear.
Even if they show a picture of themselves, it may not really be who they say they are. It could be somebody dangerous. So never get together with anyone you meet online without first checking with your mom or dad.
The X-Files is a thriller show about FBI agents after the paranormal and supernatural. While there were plenty of horrific moments throughout the show, the episodes Home and Squeeze somehow took things to the next level. Squeeze, the third episode of season 1, features a ton of stalking and body horror from a liver-eating mutant by the name of Eugene Toombs, who has the ability to squeeze into small spaces. This episode is full of little nightmare-filled moments during said stalking, a lot of claustrophobic sights, and Toombs' nest, which is made of newspaper and bile. Home is seen as the scariest episode in the series, being the first with a TVMA rating and a viewer discretion warning. It stars the main duo, Mulder and Scully, investigating an infant murder. The two discover two deformed inbreeding brothers and their amputee mother who is kept under the bed. That combined with the violence throughout just makes the whole thing super uncomfortable and all around nasty. Very much like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, the 90s loved its PSAs and drug-related ones weren't lost on the decade. I'm sure you all remember
This is your brain.
and others like it. After the Just Say No campaign of the 80s, the 90s decided to get edgier with it and employed the usage of scare tactics to scare the youth sober. A big change was the drug focus, moving from mainly cigarettes to the green and meth. But despite that, nothing scared a kid like the throat box voice ones. Ocarina of Time is a game with a few moments that might disturb a kid. The Re-Deads are one of those moments. This enemy is basically a zombie with a creepy wooden mask. They moan, and when you lock onto them, you get hit with that iconic scream. I've read a lot of old stories about kids back then taking breaks from the game after encountering them, as if they were the final boss. Doom is yet another non-horror game with horror elements that made hearts race. The demon designs, grunts, and moans that will jump scare you while traversing through got me more than a few times as a kid. Like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, Tales from the Crypt is yet another 90s horror anthology series. Ironically, this of the trio seems to have the least traumatic experiences for many viewers, but there are still episodes that stuck with kids back then. One called The Switch, where an old man keeps swapping his body parts with a younger man through surgery to impress a gold digger, and another called Three's a Crowd, where a man kills his assumed to be cheating wife and goes to hide her body in the guest house. In actuality, their friends and family were waiting to surprise them there because she was actually pregnant. Seatbelt PSAs really took off in the 90s, such as the Click It or Ticket campaign. One of those campaigns that tried to be a bit less dark for the youth starred two crash test dummies named Vince and Larry. However, to some, these two added to the fear factor for obvious reasons. Getting a game over in Rare's Banjo-Kazooie gives you what's basically the bad ending to the game. Banjo's sister Tootie has her look swapped with the game's main enemy Gruntilda, making Gruntilda beautiful and Tootie an ugly troll. I barely need to explain all the scary stuff in Majora's Mask because there's just so much. From the entire intro of Link losing his horse and friend, to the transformations and moon falling, it's a game full of stuff more intense than the series had ever before. Silent Hill 1 may have been the scariest experience on the PlayStation 1. The atmosphere and sounds were enough to make people quit the game at times. In fact, some still consider it the scariest of the entire series. All you have to do is see that first alleyway sequence or play through the hospital to understand why the title ruined everyone's sleep schedule. Speaking of scary gaming experiences, one unexpected place that one came from was deep in space during Star Fox 64. Andross's head was spooky enough, but after doing enough damage to him and blowing up the facade, his true form appears.
Only I have the brains to rule my life.
A brain, some cords, and a set of eyes. You can just imagine how this caught some kids off guard. A new drunk driving campaign would take to the airwaves in the 90s that carried the saying, "Friends don't let friends drive drunk." There were multiple versions of this PSA, but the mainly remembered ones showed victims of drunk driving experiencing some happy moment, before cutting it short to the text saying their name and how they died at the hands of drunk driving, followed by the campaign slogan. Two scenes from Jumanji that send a chill down spines are probably the ones that you'd expect. First, there's the scene where Alan is transported into the board game through the power of early unsettling CG and child screaming. And the second one I honestly don't get at all, which is the kid's transformation into a monkey. It isn't shown in any excruciating or scary fashion, but for some reason I've seen this brought up by a lot of people, including my sister, who I couldn't get to watch the movie after the first time because of these two scenes. While the movie was mid, the actual aliens and disintegrations and Mars attacks scared the heck out of plenty of kids. I know, an anticlimactic ending for this tier, but we got some good ones in the next. This was my little elementary school fear. See more smoke? Oh, I'm sorry.
See more smoke! Smoke detector!
Is a simple talking smoke alarm voiced by Gilbert Gottfried from the fire safety film Be Cool About Fire Safety. There's not much to say about him except the fact that he just made a lot of us uneasy and added to the fear of house fires. Alien invasions, conspiracies, and news were all the rage in the 90s, and thus, there was tons of reading material available on them. Magazines, hardcover books, studies, you name it. Just know that generic look of the little graves was the scariest thing to run into for a kid. The Donkey Kong series always had some scary stuff that snuck in there once Rare took over, but DK64 with the tomato monsters, Jack in the Box, and Croc's scary as heck quotes were enough to have some shut the game all the way off. Don't tell me you didn't jump when you heard "Get out." Henry Selick's stop-motion classic, James and the Giant Peach, is one of those Tim Burton-esque films for Hot Topic kids. And you know what that means. It has some nightmare fuel thrown in there, which came in the form of the Rhino, which is the big bad guy of the movie. It's a giant demon cloud that killed the main character's dad. It looks and sounds scary, and you already know that early 90s CG added to the fire. The old PS1 ad, Mental Wealth, was yet another Surreal gaming commercial. Gaming ads from the 90s through 2000s had the capacity to be extra freaky. It featured an alien girl talking about humans and her way of thinking. How does it relate to the PlayStation? I don't know. That's just how old gaming ads were, and that's why they're so memorable, even though they scared the heck out of us sometimes. There was a new version of the old Bloody Mary myth spawned by the movie Candyman. A scene in subsequential urban legend says that if you stand in front of a mirror and say Candyman 5 times, Candyman will pop up behind you and kill you with his hook hand. Gygus is the main villain and final boss of Earthbound. This cosmic destroyer is one of the most surreal looking final bosses in the JRPG, let alone one aimed at children. What you're looking at now is the final boss. I know if I was a kid when I first fought this thing, the game might have been turned off. In the movie The Witches, we see the leader of the witches, or the Grand High Witch, transform into her true form at the end of the movie, and yeah, just look at this. A Bad Case of Stripes is a 1998 children's book that became a library regular. No matter the bookstore, you probably run into this one. While the story is just a message to kids about not being afraid to be different, the art terrified them. The scenes of the girl covered in stripes were unsettling, and other imagery compounded with the art style made it even worse. It's an iconic book, but it's funny how many avoided it due to the nightmares it caused. Remember what I said about the PS1 ad being weird? Well, Xbox's Life is Short commercial is even worse. It features a baby being born, launched out of a hospital window, and while it flies through the air, it quickly ages, landing in its grave in the end. Finally, we see the slogan, "Life is short, play more." While it was controversial and even banned in some region, it definitely did its job. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the Xbox. If you were a 90s kid, the alien abduction scene from Fire in the Sky might have been your version of the Science birthday party. This was one of the most intense, scary, and realistic looking alien abduction probing scenes at that point. We see the character Travis Walton clinically examined and struggling, fighting for his life against the abductors. Worst of all for a kid, this was all allegedly based on a true story. And if you were ever a kid, which is like 100% of you, you know those 5 words are like activation codes for nightmares. Life with Loopy was a 1996 stop motion and puppet show that was featured on Nickelodeon's Kablam. Like a lot of nightmares kids media back then, The show itself didn't actually aim to be scary, and in fact, me and my sister loved it. But its presentation was more so surreal and a bit unsettling. Some even compared it to Coraline or Mr. Meaty. Something about the real puppet hands, real people popping up, and visuals like this will do that to you. Listen, I know I make fun of some of these for being like not scary to me, but don't make fun of me for this. The Mario movie Koopas scared the heck out of me as a kid.
What?
I'm sure you all remember the 90s live action Mario movie, but if you don't, I don't blame you. The movie basically took the Mushroom Kingdom and all its inhabitants and made them closer to something out of Blade Runner, including the Koopas. Man, my uncle rented this movie from Blockbuster for me and my sister once, and when these guys showed up, we ran all the way to his room until they went away so we could turn it off. The 1997 Watermelon Pop-Tarts commercial is many times cited as one of those ads that freaked out so many kids. First of all, it's filmed like this intense mystery with this creepy old guy rolling around a baby carriage, with people having upset reactions to his baby. We eventually see that the baby is a watermelon with a pumpkin carving-esque face in it. You really gotta wonder what was in the water back then if this was an ad for a children's pastry. My Girl is a 1991 coming-of-age film starring Macaulay Culkin, where he plays Thomas J., a boy allergic to quote-unquote everything. He meets a girl, Vada, an 11-year-old girl obsessed with death due to her tragic family and father's funeral home job. She becomes best friends with Thomas, eventually falling in love with him. Later, a bee swarm kills Thomas due to his allergies, while he goes to find her lost mood ring near an active beehive they knocked over. It's kind of like the Bridge to Terabithia scene for 90s kids. Rescue 911 was one of those docudrama series where they reenacted and sometimes just showed real footage of emergencies involving 911 calls. Just one of those that's scary for obvious reasons. Man, I don't even want to show a video of this one, so I'll blur it out or something for you guys. Remember the world's reaction to that stub toe scene in SpongeBob? That's how I was when I first saw the tooth scene in Ren and Stimpy. In the episode Ren's Toothache, Ren refuses to brush his teeth, leading to immense tooth pain. In near excruciating detail, Ren takes out his teeth and plucks out each of his nerve endings. Before smartphones and the internet, staying up late bored was straight TV, and that probably landed you on MTV back in the day when it was actually a thing. Back then, late at night, the channel would air experimental cartoons including the Indie Animation Showcase, Liquid Television, Aeon Flux, Celebrity Deathmatch, Daria, and the Oddities, which included the Max.
A few women who can't take care of themselves get messed with, and you ride to the rescue. Who are you to assume responsibility for their lives?
I am the Max.
All of these shows carried this weird, mature, and subversive style that cartoons didn't really dive into in the West the most just yet. In a world where cartoons were still relegated to goofy shows for kids, this change of pace was a lot for some, but it was a surreal experience that many finally look back to. I'll tell you, I personally was kind of freaked out by Celebrity Deathmatch. That show was not it for me. Kids is a 1995 film that you may have been shown in some sex ed class. It's a dark movie about underage youth getting into and being absorbed by drugs and intercourse until a bunch of them get AIDS. The film is basically a big PSA on the usual 90s affair and shared as an educational programming to scare them straight. Ghostwatch is a fake documentary horror film that was released and subsequently banned in the UK in 1992. Broadcasting on Halloween night, it aired under the guise of being a live real investigation under BBC, kind of like the old War of the Worlds airings, featuring a group of investigators being attacked by a poltergeist. It was found in wake of the programming that 2 children got the first case of TV PTSD caused from it, as well as it supposedly having a hand in one child's self-inflicted passing. Due to this mass panic and viewer complaints, it would be banned from the air for a decade. On Halloween in 1998, Midway would release the arcade light gun shooter Carnival. The game, like House of the Dead before it, was horror based, but took the setting to an evil carnival. The game was all around creepy, especially that big baby, but honestly the most fear comes from the iconic clown head in the intro. Sprite Sunfizz is a parody on kids mascots and pokes fun at Sunny D. It features kids getting a bottle of Sunfizz out before the cartoony mascot jumps out and does the usual mascot stuff. However, the family reacts with screaming in fear while it chases them. This, for obvious reasons, scared the heck out of some kids. I'm not sure what kids were out here watching Face Off like my little sister somehow ended up doing once. Then again, I watched RoboCop as a kid. Face Off is a film where a criminal played by Nicolas Cage and cop played by John Travolta trade places for a covert operation. The scary scene from this is the actual face swap, which entails slicing off each man's face and literally swapping them. Dinosaurs was a puppet sitcom developed by Jim Henson and created by Michael Jacobs and Bob Young. It was a really good and lighthearted show that explored family life and trials, but with the dinosaur family during the Jurassic era as our leads. However, the ending of the show takes a dark turn. In an energy calamity caused by the dinosaurs' industrial infrastructure and corporate greed, they bring on their own extinction. The final seconds of the show is the final broadcast of the news during the coming of the Ice Age, and we're left with the realization that everyone is dead and gone.
Good night. Goodbye.
There was a commercial that was filmed like a suspense thriller for Trix cereal. Said ad featured a man acting super suspicious while buying Trix cereal, which is just for kids. After getting home to the dinner table and finally ready to eat, we see him slowly unzip his skin in the creepiest way possible, revealing the Trix rabbit within, only to find he has no milk. It's insane to me that they felt the need to go to Stan Winston's studio to get something like this created for a cereal commercial for kids. A more underlooked 90s children horror series was Erie, Indiana, which some call a kids version of Twin Peaks. The mainly brought up episode of the show, probably because it's the first, is Foreverwhere, where the main horror comes from a family that's been around since the 50s who sleeps in Tupperware to stay young. The Boy Who Was Swallowed by the Drug Monster is a scary as heck PSA that aims to educate on the negative effects of drugs and addiction, and it's one that I was scared the heck of in elementary school. This was nightmare fuel for me. It's from the perspective of a man, now in jail, who speaks on how his childhood was taken away, partially due to drug usage. Now, you know that stuff is already enough to scare children, but what made it worse for me and anyone else trapped in watching it was the art style and visuals. It's bad enough to make the addiction into a physical monster, but those crude drawings, the voiceovers, descriptions, and the now adult focus hidden in the shadows dropping the classic "Not Even Once" made this into some of the worst nightmare fuel for a kid.
I'm your magic friend.
As he raised up on his hackles.
Don't you recognize your old magic friend?
The Faces of Death series is basically Live Leak before Live Leak. Physically released films that contain real and recreations of horrific incidents. In 1991 and 1992, Faces of Death 4 would see a VHS release and came with footage of events such as the Symphony Orchestra stage collapse in Rio, Brazil. There were also many other installments in circulation from the series. Angela Anaconda is a 1999 Nickelodeon cartoon made in cutout animation style. It follows an elementary schooler going on adventures and navigating school life and elementary drama. It's not a scary concept at all, and to me it's not scary at all, but the visual style still creeps out people, with many saying its aesthetic was nightmarish as a kid. If you were in elementary school back then or in the 2000s, I'm sure you remember the book The Giving Tree, written by Shel Silverstein. I know it was released in the 60s, but it was a library staple well into the early 2000s, and thus, the image of the author on the back of the book scared kids back then. I know you thought I was going to talk about the actual book. No, the image of the man that wrote it. For some reason, it just scared the heck out of everyone. Harvester is a 1996 cult classic point-and-click adventure game for the MS-DOS. While it's satirical, it's known for how disturbing it is, being based around media ultra-violence. You play as Steve Mason and get manipulated into joining a cult and doing increasingly violent tasks to find the secrets behind your amnesia. Harvester is super gory and is taken to the next level due to using FMV and live action actors, making it even more controversial. Inside Out Boy is a Nickelodeon short stop motion series starring a boy that's just inside out. Not like the movie, he's just literally inside out. It was just a freaky concept. Without Warning is a 1994 film that's under the facade of being a real life news investigation of a meteor fragment crash on Earth, which ends with more incoming meteors set to destroy civilization. The film was broadcasted on CBS, and the channel would constantly warn that it was fiction during each commercial break, as well as with news crawls. But the usage of real CBS graphics and such things would make it seem as real as the actual news. Humans being humans would result in tons of calls to CBS and affiliates on if it was actually happening. Other news conglomerates would get complaints about them not covering the quote-unquote news. These complaints would continue and the film would become yet another controversial one. If you've ever watched my other trauma icebergs, you know I personally can't stand these weird CG dancing babies. Well, back in '96 is when this dancing baby phenomenon would begin, leading to it appearing in music videos, TV, and plenty of commercials, including Ally McBeal. Allegedly, there were people who actually thought this was a real baby due to the technology. Make sure you remember there were people that thought the Dreamcast sports games looked realistic back then. Anyways, this baby just makes me uncomfortable. I hate this thing. Real TV is a reality television show that aired what could be called extraordinary footage that the news and other media didn't show. It's your typical look at how this person died or almost died show, featuring footage of things like amusement park accidents, skydiving mishaps, extreme storms, and more. This one is crazy. The Hip Choice PSA is truly a cursed PSA commercial that starts with the message, "Hey, you ever thought about taking drugs?" Suddenly we're in a dark puppet world where we get the typical drug PSA affair. The issue is that the ad is legit terrifying, and the dark tone of the world worsens it. And bruh, look at the druggie's eyes we see at the end. This was just too much. The ad would get complaints about kids being so scared of the ending that it was reshot with the guy leaving his glasses on. Listen, they should have took those complaints and said, let's take this thing off the air because it's horrifying. Bananas in Pajamas is originally an Australian show and later syndicated in other countries including the US. It's a show starring two bananas living in a fantasy world. Another show that wasn't scary beyond kids being taken aback by the designs of the characters and costumes. If you were up late channel surfing in the 90s, there's a good chance that you stumbled onto Sightings once in a while. This was a paranormal TV series that covered everything from UFO encounters and alien abductions to ghosts and cryptids, presenting them in a documentary style format that made it feel way too real. The interviews, real footage, and serious tone didn't help, especially for a kid who didn't have that media skepticism built up yet. This is one of those shows that had you staring at your ceiling later that night, wondering what might actually be out there and when it was going to pop up at your window that night. Traces of Death was a 1993 shock film that pushed way past anything you'd actually catch on TV, featuring real footage of accidents, crime scenes, and death, often presented in a documentary style format. Think the Yu Yu Hakusho Dark Tapes, another live leak piece of media before live leak was a thing.